Yeah, so my name's Dr. Clinton Schultz. I'm a Camilla man. So my mob come from what most people recognise as northwest New South Wales these days. But I've spent most of my life, and I feel very fortunate to have spent most of my life here on beautiful Coombamary and Yugambeh land. So I'm the co-founder, along with my wife, of Sobah Beverages. Yeah, we were Australia's first non-alcoholic craft beer company, and we started back in 2017 and have just experienced phenomenal growth over the last 12 months particularly, but definitely since we started. So we kind of like to think that we created this craze of non-alcoholic beer in Australia, and we're trying our hardest to stay at the forefront of that. Everything we produce is infused with different native botanicals, fruits, spices. So we're extremely unique. Well, I'd say we're Australia's most Australian beverage product, to be honest. We're First Nations owns. Everything we do is infused with first foods. As I said, we were first to market, and we're hoping to establish Australia's first non-alcoholic craft brewery over the next 12 months. So we're on a string of firsts, and I guess that goes back 100,000 years, and we're going to continue that trend in the space that we're fortunate enough to sort of work in. You know, I came from nothing, so I've always had to make money myself. So, you know, when I was young, it was me and my brother would be literally like going under the shelves at shopping centres trying to find coins that we could then use to buy our lollies or our Slurpees or whatever it may be. So we've kind of grown up with that mentality of, if we want something, we have to figure out how we are going to be able to make the money to be able to get what we want. So I guess that drives an entrepreneurial sort of spirit. But beyond that, I'm not necessarily a fan of having a boss as say, particularly when, you know, for the most of us as First Nations peoples, those bosses tend to end up being non-Indigenous and don't share the same sort of values that we do. So it's very hard as a First Nations person to work in Western systems run by people who come from very individualist backgrounds and don't necessarily understand the values of caring, sharing, and giving back. And social entrepreneurship is all about looking at what can I create for the purpose of being able to bring around some kind of benefit back to that collective, whatever that collective may be. For us here at Sobah, that collective spreads beyond just looking at how do we help our own communities. It's about how do we actually do something good for the Australian community and more broad. So yeah, I think that's what sets apart social entrepreneurship from just straight entrepreneurship, is it's not about just individual gain and greed. It's more about what can I create for the opportunity to be able to give back. I live my life from my law, Diriyah Gamel, so that's my Gamilaraay law, and the principles that undermine that is what I live, what I work, how I play. So I think since I've been doing that in my life, that's offered me a level of protection that I just can't get from Western systems, because they're very much based on bringing a holistic wellness to not just self but other in place, and you don't really see, I guess, foundations for that built into capitalist business structures. Yeah, I was fortunate enough that, you know, from very young I was hanging out at universities. My mum went through the whole system from when I was about 15, 16 onwards, and so I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of my time at Hurston Medical School, and there was, in the first cohort of Aboriginal peoples that went through one of the programs that they had there for Aboriginal health, was Neil Wilmot, and Neil Wilmot's a very prominent Aboriginal businessman these days, and so I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to look at his journey and how he's sort of shifted and shaped that journey. He started off in a health program, he went off into different business facets himself, he came back as a CEO within the community controlled sector, and now he's gone back out to do his own thing. So having people like that to look at how they actually navigate systems has been very beneficial. We know very well that, you know, 95% of the damage that's been done to this planet has been done in the last couple of 100 years while we've been running under westernized, commercialized capitalist systems. So we actually know that system doesn't work, but there's a lot of resistance by people who that has benefited to looking at how do we do things differently. And I think that's probably our major hurdle at the moment in terms of the whole sustainability movement, is One, Western societies allowing First Nations peoples to have that privileged voice and allowing us to actually teach how to do this, because we do know how to do it. And two, those in positions of privilege and power being prepared to, I guess, relinquish some of that for the betterment of everybody around them. Even us as First Nations peoples at times get tricked into believing we should just be working for community and that you shouldn't be thinking about doing good for yourself. I'm more of the mindset that, you know, the best way for me to be able to do good for others is to be as well as possible for myself. That enables me to give more to others. So if part of that process is about ensuring that my wife and my children and my employees and everybody else are set, and that's through us having a profitable business, well, that enables me to be in a better space to be able to give back. So that's one area where I think there's a bit of confusion, and so, as I said, sometimes that comes from our own, and we get tricked into that mentality of we should just give all the time and not ever be able to set ourselves up. The other problem I think that we have is that First Nations peoples continue to be spoken about and positioned as these lesser citizens, lesser beings, so less capable, less intelligent, less, which we know is not real. We know that we actually came from some of the most civilized, knowledgeable peoples ever on this planet, but we're pretty stubborn and we don't like rewriting history books. So as long as we're not prepared to rewrite history books and look at, okay, what were the full capacity of different peoples around the planet and what do they actually have to offer, I think we're going to struggle to move forward at a decent pace. I'm going to give my brother a plug, of course. He's doing really well for himself. He runs a futures design business and has helped a whole bunch of non-Indigenous business to really look at how do we restructure to be able to do less harm and be able to do something better. I mean, that's the foundations that we run off here as well. Like, our foundation is do less harm, do more good. We're kidding ourselves to think we can't do any harm. I'm using electricity right now. I'm breathing oxygen that could have been used by something else. But I can always be processing from a level of how do I do less harm? How do I produce more good through what I am actually doing to try and negate some of that harm that we're doing? And I think there is a lot of Aboriginal businesses that are in that space, particularly at the moment coming up in the native foods space. So I think that's the next area as such, more so than it being individuals. I think that's the next area that we should really be looking at for that leadership in entrepreneurial mindset from First Nations peoples. But again, we need to be allowed the space to actually do it. And a lot of the time that's out of our control. I'll take it back to that notion of these are creative students. You know, in my language, we talk about it as Burulu and Burulu Naili. So Burulu, you know, in today's translations, people might transfer that over to being the dreaming or dream time, and Burulu Naili being my part in that, my dreaming or my creation. So I'm always working from, in every breath I take, I have an opportunity to create something positive and add to that foreverness of past, present, future, which is our dreaming. And I think everybody has an opportunity to do that. And people in the creative fields have got a wonderful opportunity to do that. You know, they can help inspire people. They can help people to feel emotions, things that we actually need. I know governments don't necessarily always support the stuff that we actually need as human beings, but people in the creative industries are paramount to human existence and human wellness. So yeah, don't be afraid. Get out there and look at what can I actually do with what I say, think and do that's going to bring around something better for others. Watch this space.